and 4,000 guys were auditioned just for the lead part, Shaka. I wasn't interested because I was so glued to my sport. I thought acting was a soft thing, having never done it before. Well, from those 4,000 guys, I was the last one, and I was the chosen one.
Ousmane Sembene's humble beginnings in Senegal as the son of a fisherman didn't hold him back from a literary and filmmaking career. His works mainly focused on economic problems and class struggles. Even though he received international recognition for his productions commenting on African society, he's still not recognised by many people on the continent he drew his inspiration from.
Films play a very important role in our life and understanding of life. And a film festival is supposed to be a celebration of art, storytelling, and the raw human experience captured on screen. It's where directors, actors, and film lovers come together, where creativity is the only thing that matters. At least that's what we're told. So why do world leaders show up at these events? Why do we see presidents, generals, and heads of state shaking hands, sitting in front rows, and giving speeches at what should be a purely artistic gathering? The easy answer? Public relations. It looks good. It makes them seem cultured, engaged, and connected with their people. But the real answer? Cinema is power, and those in power know this better than anyone. Throughout history, film has been used to shape narratives, define enemies, and glorify leaders. The United States mastered this decades ago. Hollywood has been one of its greatest tools of influence, painting America as the hero of every global conflict, while ensuring its enemies always look like the villains. The Soviets did the same. The Nazis did it. The British Empire did it. And France? Well, France mastered the art of using cinema to justify its colonial rule over Africa, depicting Africans as chaotic, tribal, and incapable of self-rule, all while French soldiers and administrators were painted as noble civilizers. So, is it a surprise that African leaders now want to be involved in cinema? Is it surprising that they are starting to see it not just as an art form, but as a tool for self-representation, cultural independence, and even political strategy? That brings us to Fespaco, the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou, Africa's biggest and most important film festival. For decades, this festival has been about more than just movies. It has been a statement, a declaration that Africa can tell its own stories, on its terms. And in 2025, that statement got even louder, because this time, it wasn't just filmmakers in attendance. This time, political power walked into the festival, in the form of Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, the president of Chad. A film festival, a president, a country once deeply tied to France, now standing on the soil of a nation that has rejected French control. So, what does all this mean? Here, we would like to take a moment and thank you for supporting us and being a valued part of our strong community. And if you are not yet a member, we encourage you to join us and help build an even stronger community together. Let's get started. On February 21st, 2025, an official aircraft from Chad touched down at Ouagadougou International Airport. The visit had been announced, but the weight of the moment only became clear when Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, the president of Chad, stepped onto Burkinabe soil and was greeted by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young military leader of Burkina Faso, who had come to symbolize Africa's defiance against Western control. At first, it seemed like a straightforward visit. Chad was the guest of honor at Fespaco 2025, Africa's most prestigious film festival, and Deby had arrived to celebrate his country's role. But something about the scene felt bigger than cinema. It is rare for heads of state to personally attend such events. Leaders send cultural ministers, ambassadors, or special envoys. Yet here was the president of Chad, standing beside a leader who had openly expelled the French military, rejected Western partnerships, and championed Pan-African independence. This was no ordinary appearance. Deby's visit to Burkina Faso, particularly at this moment in time, was significant. A leader does not travel just for the sake of art. This was a diplomatic message, a calculated move, a signal of something shifting beneath the surface. Burkina Faso has positioned itself as a central figure in Africa's new wave of defiance against Western influence. while Chad has remained one of the few Sahelian nations still working closely with France. So what was Deby doing here? Was this a simple show of cultural solidarity, or was something deeper at play? For decades, Chad has been one of France's most trusted allies in Africa, a country that has hosted French military bases, participated in joint counterinsurgency operations, and remained largely within France's sphere of influence. Under Deby's father, Idriss Deby Itno, Chad was considered one of the most stable pro-French regimes in the Sahel, playing a key role in supporting Western military objectives in the region. Even after his father died in 2021, Mohamed Idriss Deby continued Chad's close ties with France, maintaining its status as a strategic partner for European and American interests. Burkina Faso, on the other hand, has taken the opposite path. Under Traoré's leadership, it has expelled French troops, ended all military agreements with France, and joined forces with Mali and Niger to form an independent alliance that rejects Western control. This alliance has refused Western aid, cut economic ties with European financial institutions, and instead turned toward African self-reliance, strengthening military cooperation with other Pan-African forces. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Why would Deby, whose government has remained within the Western fold, suddenly walk into the heart of this anti-Western movement? A president of his stature does not make a trip like this unless there is a purpose, a larger calculation behind it. The real turning point of this visit wasn't just the ceremonial aspects of Fespaco. It was the private, closed-door meeting between Deby and Traoré. No cameras, no journalists, and no press releases detailing the conversation. Just two leaders, alone, in a room, away from the public eye. And when two men in power meet like that, you can be sure it isn't about cinema. The most obvious reason for their discussion was security. The Sahel remains one of the most unstable regions in Africa, filled with insurgencies, foreign military interventions, and competing national interests. While Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have made it clear that they are done with the West's involvement in their security, Chad has continued working with France and the broader Western counterinsurgency framework. But as France loses influence in the region, Chad faces a choice: remain closely tied to France and risk standing alone, or begin opening discussions with the new Pan-African bloc forming between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Another key point that might have been discussed is economic independence. Burkina Faso has been pushing aggressively for self-sufficiency, investing in agriculture, building industrial capacity, and replacing Western financial aid with internal African economic collaboration. Chad, though rich in oil, has remained financially dependent on foreign markets, particularly through its dealings with European investors and Western-controlled financial institutions. Was this meeting an attempt by Traoré to convince Deby that African self-reliance is the way forward? Was this visit the beginning of economic discussions beyond the Western framework? And then, there was another moment in Deby's visit that added an entirely new layer to the trip: his homage at the Thomas Sankara Memorial. Sankara is one of Africa's most iconic anti-imperialist leaders, a man who rejected Western control and pushed for complete African sovereignty. His assassination in 1987, widely believed to have been orchestrated with French involvement, remains a symbol of Africa's long struggle against foreign domination. So when Deby, the leader of a country still closely tied to France, stood in front of Sankara's memorial, was it just a symbolic gesture? Or was it something more? In African politics, gestures like this are never meaningless. It was a statement, whether Deby intended it to be or not. Was he signaling a potential shift in Chad's stance? Was he testing the waters of Pan-Africanism? Or was it simply a diplomatic move to strengthen ties with Burkina Faso while maintaining Chad's traditional relationships with the West? By the time Deby left Burkina Faso, the official narrative was clear. It was a friendship visit, an opportunity to celebrate African cinema, and a moment for cultural diplomacy. But those who understand how power works could see that this was more than just a film festival appearance. This was a test to see how Burkina Faso would receive Chad, a test to see how the West would react to Chad engaging with the anti-France alliance, a test to explore whether Fespaco, a cultural event, could serve as a silent meeting ground for new political realignments in Africa. The question now is, was this visit a one-time event, or was it the start of something much bigger? Will Chad continue to hold its position as France's key partner in the Sahel, or is it slowly, quietly preparing to shift its alliances? One thing is certain. Mahamat Idris Deby Itno did not come to Burkina Faso just to watch movies. But the question here is, why was this festival selected for Chad's president to visit? How is it so important? For centuries, Africa's stories have been told by others. Whether through colonial history books, Hollywood films, or Western media, the narrative of Africa has often been filtered through foreign perspectives. It has been reduced to stereotypes, endless wars, starving children, struggling economies, never the full picture, never the truth as Africans themselves see it. But film is power, and in Africa, that power is growing. Fespaco is not just a film festival. It is a battleground for self-representation, a cultural declaration of independence, and a direct challenge to the West's control over African narratives. And when heads of state start attending such a festival, it is no longer just about cinema. It becomes a statement, a political and ideological moment wrapped in the language of art. Chad being the guest of honor at Fespaco 2025 is not just an artistic recognition. It is an opportunity, a moment where African storytelling is not just about entertainment, but about identity, politics, and the future of the continent's self-reliance. With films like Deby by Achille Ronimu, Chad is showing that African cinema is no longer waiting for approval, no longer seeking validation from Western film industries, but standing firm in its own right. Mahamat Idris Deby Itno's presence at the festival reinforces this. It means African leaders are starting to recognize what Hollywood and European film industries have long understood. Cinema is not just about movies. It is a tool for influence, control, and power. For decades, the West has used film to shape how the world perceives power. Hollywood created the myth of the American hero, the image of the noble Western soldier bringing peace to the world. It painted Africa as a land of disorder, a continent that always needed saving. Even in films that claimed to celebrate African culture, the underlying message was always the same. Africa is not enough on its own, and African people are violent.
We only speak in one-liners, and when we speak, we sound evil.
What did you say? Do you believe in God?
Don't lie to me!
Staying calm is stupid.
Where is the diamond? Where is the diamond? What is left?
However, there is nothing more dangerous than a brave Western protagonist. We're talking to you, shirtless Matthew McConaughey. Are you okay?
In one thing for sure, a day without war is a day not worth living.
But African cinema tells a different story. Fespaco is a response to centuries of foreign narratives. It is an assertion that Africa can and will define itself. It is about showing that African stories are not just about suffering, but about resilience, strength, and innovation. And most importantly, it is about ensuring that the future of African identity is not written in Hollywood studios, but by Africans themselves. For Burkina Faso, hosting this festival is a political act. Under Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso has positioned itself as a symbol of African independence. It has expelled Western forces, rejected foreign aid with strings attached, and pushed for Pan-African unity. Fespaco, held in the heart of this defiant nation, is more than just a cultural event. It is a statement to the world that Africa does not need Western approval to celebrate itself. For Chad, participating at this level forces a crucial question. Can African nations collaborate beyond politics? Can culture be the foundation of a new African unity? The presence of heads of state at a film festival suggests that cultural independence is being recognized as a necessary step toward full sovereignty. Political independence without cultural independence is incomplete. If African nations continue to rely on Western film industries, Western universities, and Western media to tell their stories, then their political freedom remains in the shadow of foreign influence. Cinema is a weapon. It is the way nations communicate their values, their histories, their aspirations. It is why America, China, and Russia invest heavily in film. It is why Hollywood has always been a partner of the US government in shaping global narratives. If Burkina Faso, Chad, and the rest of Africa truly want to be free, then they must control the stories they tell about themselves. That is what Fespaco represents, a step toward reclaiming the African narrative. But this goes beyond just films. This festival, attended by political leaders, might be the starting point of something much bigger. If African nations can unite through culture, they can build something that the West fears more than anything: a self-sufficient, self-represented Africa. This is not just about Burkina Faso or Chad. This is about whether Africa can tell its own story without interference. This is about whether African nations can build a film industry that does not rely on Western distribution, Western financing, or Western validation. This is about creating an African Hollywood, not in the image of America, but in the image of Africa itself. Fespaco 2025 is proving that the movement is already happening. The only question now is, will African leaders commit to it? Or will this just be a temporary moment before falling back into the old patterns of Western influence? The festival might only last a few days, but its impact could last a lifetime if African leaders truly recognize what is at stake. So, what is Burkina Faso's agenda here? Burkina Faso is not the wealthiest nation in Africa. It is not the most militarily powerful. It does not have vast oil reserves like Nigeria or Libya, nor does it dominate regional trade like South Africa. Yet, in recent years, it has emerged as one of the most influential voices in African sovereignty. Under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso has become a symbol of defiance, independence, and the new Pan-African movement that is sweeping across the Sahel. The hosting of Fespaco 2025 in Ouagadougou is yet another demonstration of this shift. It is more than a film festival. It is a declaration that Burkina Faso is not just a military and political stronghold of African resistance, but also a cultural and ideological leader. And with Chad's president, Marshal Mahamat Idriss Deby Itno, attending the event, the question arises, is Burkina Faso's influence spreading beyond its immediate allies? For decades, the global narrative surrounding Burkina Faso was simple: a small, struggling West African nation, heavily dependent on international aid, with no real power on the world stage. That was the Burkina Faso of yesterday. The Burkina Faso of today, under Traoré, is redefining its place in Africa and possibly the world. To understand this transformation, we must go back to what Burkina Faso has done over the past 2 years. The expulsion of French troops was not just a military decision. It was a signal that Burkina Faso was done being a client state of Western powers. It was a statement that the country would no longer accept foreign military presence disguised as assistance. Instead, it turned inward, building its security alliances with Mali and Niger. The three countries formed what is now known as the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a pact that not only solidified their military cooperation, but also challenged the legitimacy of ECOWAS, which has long been accused of serving Western interests rather than African ones. Burkina Faso has also been at the forefront of economic self-sufficiency. Under Traoré, the country has started making key investments in agriculture, industrialization, and mineral resource management, all to ensure that Burkina Faso can sustain itself without dependence on Western-controlled financial institutions. At the heart of this movement is a growing realization. True independence is not just about removing foreign troops. It is about taking back control of the economy, the media, and the cultural identity of the nation. That is where FESPACO comes in. By hosting Africa's biggest film festival, Burkina Faso is making another statement. Cultural sovereignty matters just as much as political and military sovereignty. If a nation still relies on Hollywood to tell its stories, if it still depends on Western media to define its history, then is it truly independent? This is what makes Chad's presence at Fespaco so significant. If this were just about movies, there would be no need for heads of state to be involved. But this is not just about movies. This is about Burkina Faso presenting itself as the center of a new Pan-African ideological movement, one that is spreading beyond its immediate borders. Burkina Faso's transformation is inspiring for many African nations that are tired of the cycle of dependency on the West. What Traoré and his government have done is prove that breaking away is possible. They have rejected the development aid trap, which often keeps African countries under foreign influence. They have shown that a country can survive, even thrive, without Western backing. But not every African leader is willing to take that risk. There are still many nations across the continent that remain deeply tied to the West, economically, militarily, and politically. For some, the thought of following Burkina Faso's path is dangerous. It risks sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and even covert Western-backed destabilization efforts. However, the longer Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stand on their own, the more difficult it becomes for other nations to ignore the possibility of doing the same. Could Chad be next? As we discussed earlier, for years, Chad has been seen as one of France's strongest partners in Africa. But Deby's visit to Burkina Faso shows that the Sahel's shifting dynamics may be forcing Chad to reconsider its position. If Burkina Faso continues to rise as a Pan-African powerhouse, it may become increasingly difficult for Chad to maintain its traditional pro-Western alliances while still engaging with its African neighbors. The more successful Burkina Faso becomes in building self-reliance, military strength, and cultural influence, the more appealing its model will be to nations across the continent. This could lead to a domino effect. If Chad begins to shift, then other nations might start reconsidering their reliance on Western powers as well. And that is precisely what makes Burkina Faso's transformation so dangerous. Not for Africa, but for the foreign interests that have long controlled the continent. Do you think more nations should join Burkina Faso? Will Chad finally give up on the West? Let us know in the comments section. Are you ready to see a new Africa in real life and film? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.